All roads lead to, where? Rome? All roads lead to a final destination, obviously. Our final destination when we're working in Illustrator, well, that kind of depends on you. We're going to talk about some of the ways we wrap up these projects. We'll start with saving for things like the web or even beyond. What do you do? How do you save something for even Microsoft PowerPoint? We'll talk about that. We'll talk about tweaking the final product to get it exactly the way you want it to be for exactly the output you're looking for. We'll talk about actually saving an Illustrator document. Now, I know this is kind of like the end, and we should have been saving all along, but we'll talk about some of the features in saving your documents as you work with them. We'll talk about outputting directly to print. Now, that's pretty easy. Most people know that when you go File, Print, you click a button, you've got a print. But there are a couple of things that we can talk about that might help that print be better for you. And finally, we'll talk about a new feature that I absolutely love. It's called creating a document package. So, saving and printing based on intent. This chapter, let's go.
Okay, everyone. Go into your working folder and open up SaveForWeb.ai. This technically is the last chapter in this particular series. However, you know what? It should be probably close to the first chapter. Now, by that I mean we're going into saving and printing options. We're talking intent, aren't we? In other words, where is this going? Now, I'll be the first to admit, on a computer, like using Adobe Illustrator, basically, you can make mistakes or not really know exactly what you want to do with it, and it's still going to be easy to fix. Let's say this guy right here, this very colorful palette. I'm designing it for a 4-color press job. If I decide I want to go to the web, it's not really going to be that much different. This lesson actually is mostly about saving for the web, but not just for the web. How about calling that Save for Monitor? Because if you go up, for example, to the word File, you actually have an option for saving to Microsoft Office. Now, what does that do? Well, if you select it, it saves it as a PNG. We'll talk more about those later. The PNG is actually the native format for Office products. If you use Microsoft PowerPoint like I do, like it, it's a nice program, and you save your documents as PNGs, you'll have soft drop shadows, transparency, they will look beautiful, people will rave about your PowerPoint presentations. Now, there's another way to save those that way, through Save for Web. So let's do this. Let me use the Control key on Windows, Command key on a Mac, and use the minus key, which allows me to zoom in a little bit or zoom down. And you can say I have 3 artboards. Artboards are actually really cool to work with. Now, we talked about those earlier, but I can choose, for example, when I'm saving a document to save a particular artboard. I can say Save for Web using a particular artboard, which we're going to do. There are a lot of advantages to using additional artboards, and they don't really take up any file size. So, we have Artboard 1 selected. You can see that down here. It says 1. Go up to the word File on the pull-down menu and go down to Save for Web or Monitor or PowerPoint. And here we go. Now, let me do this. Let me come over here and pull that over. One of the things that I think is really extremely important is when you're compressing an image for the web or PowerPoint, is you want to be able to see the original and you want to be able to see the one you're compressing, which we have. The original's on the left and the compressor is on the right. But you also want to make sure you are at 100%, not 105, not 95, not 200, because you won't really see an accurate look of how it's going to view unless you're at 100%. So we're fine there. We're great. If you come up here, you have a button for original. That's nice, but I don't want to see the original. And I don't just want to see the optimized. I want to see them both so I can compare this one to that one. Over here are the controls. Now, we're just going to go through some basic stuff in this lesson, and we'll get into what controls do in the next lesson. But this one right now is a PNG 24, which is my absolute best of the lot. It doesn't compress and lose information. It compresses and keeps everything original. So this image looks absolutely as good as this one over here, but the file size is 145.2K out of 2.05 meg. That's kind of big. Now, you have actually your presets up here. If we come over here into this option right here, you've got your 4 options for what you save this as: GIF, JPEG, PNG 8, and 24. Now, let's start with GIF, because this actually would work with GIF. If we come over here and GIF it, we have a problem. GIFs don't handle soft transparency very well. They kind of cut it out with a knife. It's either transparent or it isn't, so you get this. Now, we could turn off transparency, and that doesn't look too bad. But now you're dealing with a block of white. Now, if you're running this against a white background, that's fine. But what if it isn't white? Well, you come over here and click this button right here, and you could choose a different color. If you're working on, say, the internet, you would know the exact color of the background, and hopefully it isn't like, say, a pattern or a gradient, and you might be able to pull that off. But sad to say, if you're working with GIFs, which this image is a GIF kind of image, the problem is going to be, because of the drop shadow, it's not going to look good. So before we go any further, let's do this. Get out of here for a second. I have the shadow in a separate layer. I'm going to turn it off. Now we come back again, save for web, and we go back into GIF. Let me move that over. Looks great. Suggestion. If you're working with images that are clip art, and GIF is good for those, that is called basically graphic interchange file format. It uses RLE compression. RLE compression basically is a compression method that loves solid colors, and clip art has a lot of solid colors in it. GIF does work pretty good for this, okay, but it doesn't like drop shadows, so I would avoid them. Now, the other one that's kind of like comparable to GIF is the PNG 8. Let's skip this one for a second, JPEG. Watch what happens over here and over here. One eye here, one eye here. Actually, not much of anything. The options are the same, and it looks the same over here. Now, we are at 49.16 on a PNG 8, and we are at 53, so it helps to go to the PNG 8. What is the difference? Well, the GIF format is the oldest of them. It's one of the first formats to come out for the internet along with JPEG. But the PNG 8 is beginning to replace it. The World Wide Web Consortium has considered PNGs actually native to the internet today, so I would suggest, unless you're working with people that have very old browsers, you might want to consider using the PNG 8. It is a nice format, so it'll work. Now, we'll talk about these options in the next lesson. The other one is, of course, PNG 24, which works great, but let's go to JPEG. Now, JPEG will do the same thing. It makes the file smaller. We're down to 33, but JPEG has one drawback, in that it doesn't support transparency at all. And you're going to have to put it against a background and choose a color over here. And hopefully you can blend that into whatever you're working with. So in terms of file size, JPEG probably would be the best one. But in terms of practicality, you're probably going to use a GIF or a PNG 8, one of the two. Let's go ahead and get out of here for a second. Let's go to our second one. Now, our second artboard, that is a graphic, that is a gradient mesh. If I go to the word View on the pull-down menu and go to Outline, whoa, it's pretty complicated. But it looks almost photo-like, doesn't it? Let's go ahead and go save for web on this guy. And let's start with GIF. And let me go ahead and move this over so we can see them both like that, 100%. Now, the GIF format actually only goes to 256 colors. That's the maximum you can get. You can see the color table down here. You can actually work with that and change it if you want to. That doesn't look too bad. Actually, in this case, if you look at it really closely, it's not quite as good as this one over here, but practically almost as good. And because we're not using any softness in terms of drop shadows, actually seems to come across pretty good. Again, you could turn off transparency here and put it against a white background if you want to. Now, the PNG 8, we're at 42.5. If we go to PNG 8, we're at 36. Again, if you're looking at your audience on the web, and your web audience is running browsers above 4 or 5, basically I would say go to a PNG 8 because it's going to be smaller and it's going to work. Now, we have other options down here like image size, and like I said, we'll talk more about this stuff in the next lesson. But if you're working with an image that's photo-like and you can afford not to use transparency, you might actually want to go to the JPEG. Now, we're at 36.09. We're now at 19. And that's actually at a pretty good quality setting of 60. But again, the problem's going to be it doesn't support transparency. Let's go ahead and get out of here. And our last artboard is a combination. I have a photograph and I have text. So if we go back up here and go into Save for Web, let me go ahead and move this over. Even though I can't see the whole thing, I would rather see only a portion at 100% than shrink it down. Okay, I want to see it at 100%. Come over here. The PNG-24 is the best. I mean, it really is the best of the lot. But they create big files that on the internet are kind of hard to shift. So that's 488.6. That's a lot. I would suggest that since we have text, which is vector, and we have a photograph, which would be best with JPEG, err toward the photograph. In other words, use JPEG. So we've got 488.6. We go JPEG on this thing, we're down to 107. Now, we'll go even further down when we talk about the options. But that's not too bad, and the image looks pretty good. Now, in terms of recapping here, let me go back to number 1. If you have something very clip artish like this, then I would suggest PNG 8 or the GIF format. However, you need to drop or lose all the drop shadows because they're not going to work. If you're working with something like this one, which is almost photographic, if you can afford to use a white background, go JPEG because it would be the best. But if not, again, since we don't have a drop shadow, we could PNG 8 it or we could GIF it. If we are working with something that's a combination, photos and text in this case, I would err toward the photo and go JPEG with it and compress it down. 3 different ways to save images for the web, but not just for the web. Don't forget all that other stuff we have out there, like Microsoft Office. Go ahead and reopen Save for Web.ai. We used this in the previous lesson. Let's get a little bit deeper into some of the ways that we can control an image if size is really a consideration. So let's start with this here, the palette. Now, if you're reopening Save for Web, you want to turn off the shadow because the first 2 we're going to talk about are PNG8s and GIFs. They actually have the same options, so it's kind of economical. We can do both at the same time, but they don't like drop shadows, do they? Let's go ahead and go up to the word File and go down to Save for Web. Let's go ahead and position ourselves. Let me get that thing. Put it like this. We're in 2 up over here. Now, if you go into GIF and you go into PNG8, they're exactly the same features. So we can cover both at the same time. I would recommend PNG8 if you can get away with it, but it doesn't work with older browsers around 4 or 5 or earlier. So it's a better format to work with. It makes the image smaller. GIF is being phased out eventually anyway. What do we got here? Well, number 1, you have interlaced. Now, our base reading right here is 49.16K. Let me write that down so I don't forget that. 49.1, which is not too bad. If we turn on interlaced, it goes up by almost about 10 or 15%. Goes up to 57.52. What does interlaced do? Well, according to marketers and people that design on the web, it's a better way to load a GIF because it loads it in stages as opposed from the top down. But it does create a bigger file, so that's up to you. And it won't work with, again, earlier browsers. The colors we have right now are 256. Now, we can change from selective into things like, well, perceptual, adaptive. The best one to use if you're working with something other than selective is perceptual, because it's the perception of the colors, and it seems to work best with most graphics. So I'm going to put that back at selective because we can choose the colors over here. The maximum number of colors in PNG8 or GIF are 256, but I can change that to get a smaller file. Now remember, 49.16 is what we have now. If I cut that in half, you want to watch the image to see if it's going to change. And it really doesn't. It looks pretty good. We're down to what? Well, in this case, it's the same number, so we're not helping ourselves there. If we go all the way down, say, to 2, all right, it's only 2K, but you wouldn't want that. So what I usually do is I go down the scale until I see something that I think is going to work and it's not impacting the quality of the image. I'm at 64 now. Now, the last we did was 128. And yes, it definitely makes a difference. So I'm not going to go to 64. I'm willing to take the extra over here because I want the image to look as good as possible. You have a dithering process right over here. You've got none, diffusion, pattern, or noise. What does that do? Well, there are more colors probably in this image than can be displayed with the 256, or in our case, 128. What the diffusion pattern does is it puts colors that it has in combinations to help the eye see the colors and color memory see colors that aren't there. Kind of an interesting process, I'm sure, but diffusion helps you do that. Now, you can change to a different type of diffusion, pattern or noise, and see if that works better. This is usually the best. And we can choose how much diffusion we use over here. Now watch what happens to the image when I take that down to 0. You can see the difference. Now, if I take that back up again, it does look better. Oh, incidentally, we're down to 38.89 if we use that. But if we take it back up, it does look somewhat better. But I think we can get away with about 50% on that. Again, I'm watching the image. Once I get it where I want, I move my eyes to the image and I let go. I want to see what it's going to look like. I can accept that. I'm down to 31. I'm happy. Transparency, we already talked about. You can change the transparency, turn it on or off, or come over here and choose a different color, or click here and specify a particular color. Up to you. Down here, we don't have any transparency. You can use diffusion or pattern or noise on the transparency. In other words, where it becomes transparent. Right now we have no transparency dither, so it's rather sharp on the edges. I like diffusion transparency dither. Now that actually reduces the file size by about 1K. I'm going to turn that one on. You can change the amount, and down here you have what's called web snap. Do you want to snap these colors only to web? Now watch what happens if I take it all the way down, or all the way up, I should say. I'm snapping to all those colors, and wow. I mean, that's an interesting look. It's not what I want. We're down to 12K. That's not going to work. Again, what I do is I'll start here at web snap 0, and then I'll say take it up about 10 or 15, let go, see if I like it. Actually, that works. Let's go ahead a little bit higher. Let's go to 50. Again, once I get here, I move my eyes over to the item before I let go. Nah, that's starting to go. So I'm going to take that back down to about 25. 38.72K. Now we can change the size here, or the percentage. We can either go by size or percentage. We have an art optimized or type optimized. Art's probably the best. And we can clip to the artboard. Now what's that? Now if I turn that off, I get all 3 artboards in this one document. I don't want that. That's why I say clip to the artboard. If we like what we see, click Save, give it a name, put it somewhere where you want it to be. There you go. Let's go ahead and get out of here. Let's get out of here too. Let's go to our photograph and text. And let's go back up one more time. File, Save for Web. Let's go ahead and move that over. I want it at 100%, whether I can see the whole thing or not. Over here, now let's look at PNG24 and JPEG. Now the PNG24 is my best. I like it. You only have 2 options. Do you want transparency or not? And you want to interlace it. Now again, that makes it load in stages. A nice way to do it, but increases file size. We're at 488, which is really unacceptable for the internet. If I interlace it, we go up to 546. That's over half a meg. Wow. Let's not worry about PNG24 unless you got a lot of bandwidth or you're going out to PowerPoint. Let's go to JPEG. Now in JPEG, the default is at 60% quality. It's optimized, and we're at 107, which is still more than what I want. The optimized option, again, will not work on very old browsers, and it doesn't really save that much at all, about 2K out of 107. But if you can afford it, go ahead and do it. Over here is our quality. Now you've got the options over here, and you've got options by the number over here. If I change that, let's go all the way to 0. Again, watch the image. See a change? Got more blurred in these areas. The text is more indistinct. We're down to 23K though, but I don't like it. Now what I do here is I begin at 100, which is perfect, which is way too big. And I begin taking it down, say about 20 or 30 at a time. Where I've found for photographs, the best place to kind of be most of the time is around 30%. So if I take this to 30%, again, you want to watch the image over there. Slight change, but we're down to 52K out of 2.05 million. That's not too bad. 30 is kind of my go-to number when I'm working with graphics, if they're going out to the internet. PowerPoint, no, that's not a problem. I go PNG24. Now you have a progressive option right here. You'll notice that does lower it even more. It helps the image compress and load faster, but again, it's not supported by all browsers. Why would I blur an image? Joint Photographer Expert Group JPEG images work best with areas that are shadowed. If you have more sharp areas in the image, well, it's harder for it to compress it. I'm not suggesting you do this, but watch what happens to that number when I introduce blur. We're down to 27. That's about half, but I wouldn't use that. There are times where you might be able to get away with a little bit of blur, but in most cases you're probably not going to use it. Do you want to insert the ICC profile, which increases by about 6K? Not a whole lot, but that is about 8% or so. What does that do? Well, it helps the image on the other side look more like the colors that you imagine because you're using the International Color Consortium profile. Most browsers today do support that. If you want to change the color from white on the matte, you can. Down here, we can change the image size. If we are working with art and text, I would default toward art optimized, not type. You'll get a better image. And that's about it. You like it? You can click Done. In other words, you can actually finish the job out, come back later, your settings are still there. Let's say we like what we did right here. You can click this button right here, and you can go into Save Settings and have it as one of your default presets. But there is one other option up here. Optimize to file size. Go ahead and click this. Now, optimize to file size. You decide a size you want. It will do what it needs to get there. You say, well, I want something around 20K. Now, your choices are the current settings, in other words, JPEG, or can it use a JPEG or a GIF? Now, I want a JPEG here, and we're only working with one slice. We're not slicing in this particular lesson, obviously. That's for the web. And click OK. Now, if you noticed, it did change. And if you look at the original, we don't have the quality. But we do have the number we want. It's down to 21 down here. That's as low as it could get it, or close as it could get it. So we can even use that number if we want. Now, the last thing is you do have a preview here. Now, if I click that, it will preview open up in Safari. And I can actually see what it would look like in Safari on that page. If I get out of there and click the globe right over here, I can edit the list and add other browsers. Maybe I want to use Explorer. I've got all the control I want to. You like it again? Click Save and save it. You want to save these settings and come back later, click Done. It will take you back to Illustrator. PNG8s and GIFs, JPEGs, and PNG24s. They're all in Save for Web. Each one has their own particular function. Go into your working folder and open up saving.ai. We're going to do something that some might think is a little bit late out of the gate. We're going to talk about saving, just plain old run-of-the-mill saving an Adobe Illustrator document, something that if you work in Illustrator, you do every day, saving a document. There are questions to be answered when you save a document. If you go up to the word File on the pull-down menu, you've got Save. Now, this document has already been saved one time. So if we do save, it'll just save it because we've already answered the questions. But to get back to the questions as if it's new, do a Save As. Now, let me give that a different name so it doesn't ask me to replace it. And let's look at our formats right here. Now, we're going to Adobe Illustrator AI, but you have EPS. I think of EPS as a more compatible AI. For example, some applications won't open an AI, but they would open an EPS. A lot of presses, four-color presses, like EPS over AI. EPS handles vector and raster very similar to AI. So if you've got that problem, trying to open an image or send it somewhere, you might want to consider EPS. You've got template, if you want to use a document over and over again as a template. PDF documents, fun to work with, very easy. All you got to do is click the button. SVGs, scalable vector graphics, are used a lot. They're resolution independent. And they're used a lot even in web design. So you got a lot of different options here. Let's go AI and click Save. Now the options start with version. CC, check this out, all the way down to Illustrator 3. Now everything under CC is legacy. One of the reasons it's legacy is because it's not cloud compatible. But the other reason is you get down to about here somewhere. And Illustrator began handling text differently. So you could have a problem with text if you've got to go down that far. If you see these options here, notice they're grayed out. They don't come up until you get down to about, Illustrator 8. We're not going to worry about those. Let's go back to CC. Your fonts, you can subset your fonts if the percentage of characters is used as less than, and you can choose the percentage. You can create a PDF compatible. Now that's more than just, I can open it as a PDF. Some programs will not open Illustrator documents unless that option is selected. So it is a default. I would recommend you're probably going to leave that one on. Now, we don't have any linked files, but if we did, it would ask if you want to include them. Do you want to embed the color profile? I usually do, and that's the profile that will allow it to really look good someplace else, the ICC profile. Compression can't be used by earlier versions of Illustrator, but I would recommend you put it on because it does make the file smaller. We don't have any artboards, but check it out. We could save each artboard to a separate file. That's pretty cool. This stuff, only if you're really going back in time. You've got two warnings here. One is the document raster effect resolution is 72 or less, and only fonts with appropriate permission bits will be embedded. This one's always on. In other words, some fonts will not allow you to save them with the Illustrator document. They're protected. I'll only worry about that if I get that problem. But what about that 72? Let's get out here for a second and say, well, you know what? I have printed these things out before and done things with them. You know, it just doesn't look as good as I thought it was going to look. It looks almost pixelated. Not a lot, but it just doesn't look that good. Well, if you remember a couple of chapters ago, if you go to the word effect on the pull-down menu, you have document raster effect settings, and it's at 72. Hey, I'm taking this thing out to a press. I want that thing up high, like about 300. Click OK. Now when you go back to File and do a save, and let me go ahead and give that a name again, all the work. You can see we only have one warning now because we're up to 300. If you save it at 72, does that mean you can't come back and resave it again at 300? No, you can't. So Illustrator allows for that. It's a very flexible program. But the options that you choose under File Save, as simple as a file save, are very dependent on the intent of where you're going with this. Always remember intent. Go into your working folder and look for a document called Save to Print and go ahead and open it up. Now, we've talked about saving a document, okay? We've talked about saving it, and we're saving it to give to somebody else maybe. But let's talk about not just saving, but also to print. So we have a printer hooked up to our computer, which probably would be like a inkjet or maybe a laser. I don't know too many people that have a 4-color press hooked up to their computer, but you might. I want to print this thing out. Now, remember one of the things that's really important under the word effect, and that is the document raster effects that we talked about earlier. It's important to set that up correctly. The other thing is, I suppose, your artboard itself. Now, if we print this now the way it is, the artboard, if we have a piece of paper that matches that, the image is going to be there, the artboard's going to be on the sides, it's going to be white. If we go back up, let me show you something I didn't show you before. If we go into File, say for Web, and this time I'm actually going to bring it down to fit on the screen. Okay, that's that area that we saw as white. Clip to Artboard does two things, in a sense. If you have more than one artboard and you turn that off, you get all the artboards in this one single document. But if you only have one artboard, watch what happens. It will be more than glad to shrink fit it to the image itself. So if you're going out to the web or somewhere, PowerPoint, whatever, and you want the image to fit, makes sense. Let's get out of here. How do I do that here if I'm going to print? Well, if you go up to the word Object on the pull-down menu and go down to Artboards, one of your options is Fit to Artwork Bounds. And if you do that, well, there you go. So you don't have to worry about it. But the powers that be that want us to print this want us to print it on a particular size paper, 8.5 by 11. So let's do this. This button over here controls our artboard, but double-click on it. It's easier. You get the options. Now, in options, we have presets, and one of our presets would be, say, letter. In the United States, that's 8.5 by 11. Let's go ahead and click OK, and you will notice that the image is a whole lot bigger than the paper. So let's go ahead and pick up our selection tool, and let's go to a corner. I'm going to hold the Alt key, that's the Option key on a Mac, Alt key in Windows, and the Shift key, and I'm going to bring it down until I can fit it. Now, unless I want it to stretch, which I don't want it to do, I am going to have some lighter areas at the top and the bottom. Again, you could play around with that all day long. We could come over here and select it and come over here into Transform, and we could change it right here by the numbers if we wanted to get it exactly where you want it to be. You say, Andy, that's in millimeters. I need inches because I live in the United States, or I need centimeters or whatever. Well, what you can do here, number one, go into View and go down to Rulers and say Show Rulers. This would be just one way to do it. Then right-click on the ruler up here and change, say, in my case, to inches. So if I come back over here again and do Transform, I can now type in, for width, 8.5. And fit it exactly at least to the width. Now that assumes you're printing on a piece of paper that does a full bleed, but we've got that done. We're ready to print this thing out. If you go up to the word File on the pull-down menu and go down to Print, the first thing to notice is this area here. It's showing us what it's going to do if we do click the Print button, but we have a problem, and that is my printer and driver does not support full bleed, and it's going to cut it. We'll talk about how you might solve that in a minute. Up here, starting at the top, you have Print Presets if you have any. Let's say we do a pretty good job of manipulating this information, and we would like to use it again. Click this button up here and click and save it as a preset, and you won't have to redefine the wheel every time you want to come back. Down here, you got a different printer, choose it. How many copies do you want? Do you want to collate and reverse the order? We don't have any artboards, but we could control what prints. Media size is defined by the driver, that's 8.5 by 11. However, we can change that if we want to. Do you want to change it into a different orientation? Down here, printing visible and printable, visible or everything, up to you. Placement of the image is where it is right now in the center. Now I can drag and move it this way, but you could use the numbers down here. Do you want to scale it? How about fit to page? Watch what happens. It will put it into the printable area for me with the click of a button. Now down here, you do have page setup and setup. Let's save those for later. Come over to marks and bleeds. Well, basically, do you want trim marks and registrations and color bars, page information? That would be there probably for like a printer, like a print press. If not, I wouldn't really worry too much about those. Let's go into output. Now, we're not dealing with the CMYK, so we don't really have to worry about much going on here. In fact, most of this is grayed out anyway. For graphics, you have one thing that's important here, and that's flatness. See the quality to speed? If I move that over this way, it will print faster, but why? What's it doing? It's reducing the number of anchor points in the image. The more you go towards speed, now what does that mean? It will print faster, but the image itself may change because it doesn't have enough anchor points to support the shape. Up to you. I would leave that on quality unless you really have to. For color management, let Illustrator determine colors is usually what I use. On the printer profile, you have quite a few. I've been moving from sRGB into more ProPhoto. I really do like that, and it does really, in my opinion, help the colors match to print. So I'm going to use and change that to ProPhoto. Now, on rendering intent, you have perceptual, saturation, relative, and absolute. Absolute kind of really changes the colors to fit the gamut of the printer. The best one to use if you're not really sure is relative. If it doesn't work in a test print, I would go to perceptual next. Saturation is really for high saturation clip art, but I would start with relative colorimetric. I think that's the best one. And let's come to advanced. And there are a few things in here like for overprints and that we don't really have to worry about. And then you get a summary here. Go back to general. Now you have two more buttons down here. Page setup and setup. If you click page setup, it's going to warn you that you've already done it. Why do you want to go to the operating systems dialog box? In most cases, you don't need to, okay? So we'll say, well, return to print dialog. But let me show you this one on setup. Does the same thing, but let's go ahead and go into it. Well, it's your print dialog system for that printer based on your operating system. So if you're working in Windows right now, you're going to see something different. But you could override what we just did by coming into here and changing things. If you do, it will be glad to do it for you. I'm going to go ahead and click cancel because I like what's going on here. Then, of course, you can click print. Everything's hooked up the way it's supposed to be. You got a good print. What's done? Well, done means something like this. I made a lot of changes. I don't want to make this a preset, but I want to remember what I did to this image because I'm coming back in an hour to print it. If you click done, it will take you back to the image, and when you reopen print, all these settings will be there for you. Like anything else, when you're working in Illustrator, the bottom line is intent. Where is it going? What are you doing with it? That will determine how you set this up. In this lesson, we're going to talk about a new feature in Adobe Illustrator Creative Cloud that we've been asking for a long time. It's called Package. Now, InDesign has had package for a long time, and now we have it in Adobe Illustrator, but what is it? We'll take this document. For example, that balloon, which actually came from our friends at photospin.com. You should check them out. They've got some really excellent resolution-independent, well-done graphics. I've linked that. It's not embedded, so it's somewhere on my hard drive. I have a unique font, and I want to put this all together and give it to somebody else. I want to make sure they have that font, and I got to remember where I put the balloon because it's linked. Now, you could go further than this. You could have Microsoft Word documents embedded, all kinds of things. Incidentally, you guys don't have this file. Open up one of your own that has unique fonts and graphics in it. If you want to move it, go up to the word File on the pull-down menu and go down to Package. Now, if you need to save it, it will say, well, you got to save it first. I'm going to click Save. And here we go. Location. The location will be where the original AI document is. If that's not acceptable, it's going to be a folder. You can click here and change the location. That's the name of the folder right there, Up folder, because the name of the AI document is called Up. Now here's our option. Copy the links. Well, yeah, I want those. Collect the links in a separate folder. Why not? That's organization. Relink link files to the document. Yes. Do you want to copy fonts used in the document except CJKs? And those are like special characters, Japanese fonts. If you need them, turn that off. And create a report. Sure. Tell me what you did. Click Package and sit back. Now it's going to tell me I have restrictions on my fonts. It gives me the right to copy them so somebody else can use them to print, but they can't keep them. Okay, fonts are the property of the company that made them. We kind of rent or lease them from them. So I'm going to say, okay, I understand that, and my client does too. Now, do you want to show the package? Sure. Let's see what it is. And here it is right here, Up folder. Here are my fonts. Here are my links, as many as you need. Here is the Up report text. Very simple, but it tells me everything worked. And here is the AI document. Packaging gives me the ability to create a complicated document, and if nothing else, give somebody the fonts that guarantees they can print it out for me. I love this new feature.
So, what have we learned? I don't know, where are we going? Good questions. Let's talk about what we learned. Now, we started with essentials. That's what this class was all about, essentials in Adobe Illustrator. So we looked at things like, well, preferences, workflow. There is nothing, in my opinion, more frustrating to my creative abilities if I know I can do something in Illustrator and it takes me 30 minutes to figure out how I do it. So much for creativity. So we looked around. We opened up the drawers, figured where things are, keep that up because there's a whole lot more hidden around in this program that really does help. We talked about the basic components of a vector or a resolution independent object. And that is, of course, anchors and paths. And we looked at how they impact an object, how we work with them, how we change them. Using the pen tool, which is the basic drawing tool, we graduated into shape tools. We added life with colors and fills and gradients, building. We went into effects, blending modes. I love blending modes. Pathfinder tools. Talk about taking simple shapes and making them complex. That's Pathfinder all over. We looked at all the different components of this program that can help you out, and then we kind of wound up making a little bit of what we do with it when we're done, how we save it, how we print it. All that in this Essentials class. Now remember, there are two things that make you successful anytime you open up these programs. Left and right brain skills. The left brain skills are how you use the program. That's the logic of it, okay? The right brain skills are creativity. So where do you go from here? Well, number one, keep learning, keep exploring, pull menus down. If you don't understand what one of the options is, figure it out. Find help, get information, know the program. Number two, the right brain is practice. We use this program in the industry, so we're using it. You can't really practice when you're on a project. Find time to just sit down with this program and use it. I have never seen one single student that I've taught, even like me, who grew up with brushes and oils and sketching and all kinds of fun stuff, pick up the pen tool for the first time and create some kind of Rembrandt. Practice made me better at using these tools. You have to practice, and you can't practice when you're working. So left, right brain skills, practice and find out where things are. The more you know about this program, the more you are going to control it and the more creative you are going to be. That's a promise. That's about it. Tell you what, this is Andy Anderson saying, keep the faith, keep learning.